Thank you very much, and thanks for the organizers for having us. Particular thanks to my cheering section up front here and the Iveric crew. So we use this word a lot at Iveric, and it's really a mindset. If you look at the definition of this word, the Oxford English Dictionary defines it as a radical change to an industry or a market due to technological innovation. And if you think about how this shows up in our industry, it can be in a number of different ways. The most obvious of which is the development of new therapeutics to treat disease. But we're taking that approach to things like artificial intelligence, how we approach access, even how we get drugs from our offices and our manufacturers out to where they're eventually treated. But for what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to really focus in on how we're innovating and how we're disrupting the entire space as it relates to the development of novel therapeutics. This is a snapshot of the Iveric bio pipeline, and it's made up of small molecules and gene therapies. Avacincaptad pegol, also known as ACP, has completed phase 3 testing for geographic atrophy and is currently in clinical studies for Stargardt's disease. IC500 is a small molecule protease inhibitor of HTRA1. This is a protease that's known to be involved in the development and the progression of geographic atrophy. Our gene therapy programs target 3 very difficult to treat diseases, including LCA10, autosomal recessive Stargardt's, and Usher's 2A. The common theme of all of these development programs is that up until a couple of weeks ago, none of them had any available treatment options. We're not just looking to build a better mousetrap at Iveric. We're really looking to innovate in places where there is true unmet need. Our program that's furthest along is avacincaptad in the treatment of geographic atrophy. If we think about the disease itself, roughly 1.5 million patients here in the United States, 5 million globally. About a third of the total population, by the time they hit 80, will be affected by geographic atrophy. And without a treatment, to date, most of these patients are just spinning, being seen once or twice a year, or they're not even diagnosed. In our market research, we had patients tell us that they were told they had the good AMD. And of course, there is no such thing as the good AMD. And while the visual acuity loss associated with geographic atrophy may not be as acute as what we see in neovascular AMD, it's not trivial. This is one of the largest retrospective cohorts that have been looked at out of the UK in patients with advanced GA. And what it shows you is that 40% of these patients will lose 2 lines in little over 2.5 years. About a third will lose 3 lines. That kind of loss isn't trivial. It translates directly into what these patients are able to do. Roughly 2/3 of patients in this study lost the ability to drive in a 1.5 years. That's impactful. And the problem with this disease is that you just don't know. There's plenty of us that have looked at images like this when patients come in and said, well, it should be okay. Oh, see you in 6 months or a year. This is that patient a year after. And while he hasn't had a tremendous change, you see that spot that has shown up right in the middle of the fovea, essentially annihilating good functional vision for this patient. Here's another patient. Looks okay, maybe seen once or twice a year. Less than a year later, you can see all of that hypertransmission on the bottom of the OCT, showing that we have massive disease progression. And it's part of the reason why we think optometry is so important to the treatment of this disease. The diagnosis and appropriate referral of these patients becomes more critical than ever now. And this type of progression we know is driven by overactivation of the complement system. Avacincaptad is a small pegylated RNA aptamer that specifically targets the terminal part of the complement system. And by hitting this terminal part of the complement system, you take care of the inflammation and the cell death that's directly associated with not only the development, but the progression of geographic atrophy. Last year, we announced the results of the GATHER2 study. And what it showed was, it was the second trial to show a statistically significant benefit in the reduction of geographic atrophy expansion with ACP versus sham. The results of this program in total gave the FDA the ability to give us breakthrough therapy designation for this treatment, the only drug in the treatment of geographic atrophy that has ever received that designation from the agency. At the end of last year, in December, we submitted our NDA application, and we have an FDA action date set with the priority review of August 19th of this year. So between that day and now, the team here at Iveric is busy getting ready to bring this potentially exciting therapeutic option to patients. But we can't do it without your help. And we look forward to working with all of you in bringing this option to patients. Thank you.